What if I told you some of the most unforgettable TV shows you've never seen weren't canceled? They were hidden in plain sight. Imagine a show so bold, so daring, it was pulled before you ever got the chance to see it. Why did these 1970s TV shows vanish without a trace? Stay tuned to uncover the shocking truth behind the TV legends that slipped through the cracks. The reason these shows disappeared might surprise you. Supertrain, 1979. Imagine the world's most luxurious train, an ultra-modern behemoth cutting through a futuristic landscape. Supertrain was a high-budget disaster, boasting lavish sets and an ambitious concept, but it crashed and burned almost immediately. Despite the hype, it couldn't recover from its astronomical production costs, and critics were quick to dismiss its campy, low-budget feel. The show, which aimed to combine action, drama, and mystery on a train with high society passengers, couldn't sustain the massive expectations placed on it. A prime example of the dangers of overindulgence, it only lasted for a single season. The failure of Supertrain is still seen as one of TV's most infamous misfires, but in its wake, it has earned a unique place in pop culture history. It wasn't just a flop. It was a spectacle of excess, too far ahead of its time for an audience that wasn't quite ready for it. The Scarecrow and Mrs. King, 1979. This spy drama tried to be a mix of Moonlighting and Charlie's Angels, combining espionage with light-hearted romance. The Scarecrow and Mrs. King told the story of a suburban housewife, Amanda King, who accidentally gets involved in a covert operation with a smooth-talking secret agent, Lee Stetson. Despite its intriguing premise, the show had trouble shaking off its goofy tone, and the charm that worked in spy thrillers fell flat for many viewers. In the end, its early promise couldn't hold on to an audience, and it was canceled after just one season. It's easy to imagine how this series could have thrived today, with its blend of action, comedy, and romance. Instead, it joined the ranks of 1970s shows that were ahead of their time but too quickly written off. Get Christy Love, 1974. In 1974, Get Christy Love made waves as the first show to feature an African-American female secret agent, something that was groundbreaking at the time. Christy Love was strong, smart, and sassy, and breaking barriers in a world dominated by white male heroes. The series had a bold edge, with its action-packed plots and a female lead in a traditionally male-dominated genre. But despite the cultural significance and critical praise for its innovative concept, the show struggled to build a lasting audience. One season was all it had, leaving viewers with a taste of what could have been. Get Christy Love was a pioneer that unfortunately didn't have the time to fully break through, yet it remains an essential piece of television history, a reminder of how far TV has come in diversity and representation. My World and Welcome to It, 1969 to 1970. Loosely based on the works of James Thurber, this quirky sitcom centered around a brilliant but eccentric cartoonist trying to juggle his creative life and chaotic personal world. The show was unique in its blend of animation and live action, often incorporating Thurber's whimsical drawings into the narrative. But despite critical acclaim, My World and Welcome to It couldn't capture the hearts of a wide audience. It was an intellectual comedy with humor that was too subtle for mainstream viewers, and its audience wasn't ready for such a cerebral take on family sitcoms. It lasted only one season, but it remains one of the most unique and underrated gems of the 70s, capturing a time when television was still finding its voice in a rapidly changing world. Turn On, 1971. Turn On didn't just fail, it became the very definition of a spectacular television crash. The cutting-edge sketch comedy series was marketed as bold, daring, and innovative, but it turned out to be far too much for the audience at the time. Designed to shock and entertain, the show's experimental style, quick edits, and risque humor were met with a backlash so intense that it was pulled after only one episode. Viewers and critics alike were appalled by its unconventional approach, which went beyond typical boundaries for a primetime show. Turn On was meant to break all the rules, but in doing so, it alienated the very audience it sought to entertain. The controversy surrounding its swift cancellation only added to its infamous status. Now, Turn On stands as a fascinating example of what can happen when a network gambles too boldly, pushing the limits of humor and entertainment, only to find itself on the losing end. It serves as a stark reminder of the power of audience expectations and the perils of launching too far ahead of the curve. It may have been a colossal failure, but Turn On remains a singular moment in television history, a risky venture that became a cultural footnote. The Rookies, 1972 to 1973. With its gritty portrayal of rookie police officers, The Rookies offered a refreshing alternative to the glossy, action-packed cop shows of the era. The series followed three rookies, Mike, and Terry, on the beat as they navigated the trials and tribulations of early police work. Set in a realistic, urban backdrop, the show gave viewers a raw and unvarnished look at life on the force, a departure from the more glamorous portrayals of police life on shows like Starsky and Hutch. Though despite initial success, and even some critical praise, including several Emmy nominations, the show couldn't maintain its momentum. As the series went on, the storylines grew formulaic, and the intensity that initially drew audiences in began to fade. In a highly competitive landscape, The Rookies was ultimately unable to retain its audience and fell victim to the one-season wonder curse. Though it ended prematurely, the show left behind a legacy as an early attempt to bring more grounded, character-driven police dramas to TV. It's easy to imagine how The Rookies could have evolved into a staple of 70s television, but as it stands, it remains a beloved yet fleeting chapter in the genre's history. The New People, 1969 to 1970. What if a group of young strangers were suddenly stranded and forced to build a society from nothing? That was the premise behind The New People, a bold social experiment disguised as a drama. A plane crash leaves a group of diverse young survivors on a remote island, where they must create rules, leadership, and order. Sounds gripping, right? It was. But here's the problem. It was too serious, too philosophical, and way ahead of its time. Instead of easy drama, the show asked uncomfortable questions about power, race, and control. Audiences didn't want to think that hard. Not in prime time. Ratings slipped, interest faded, and just like that, it was gone after one season. Today, it feels eerily modern, almost like a prototype for reality TV and survival dramas. But back then, it was simply too bold for its own survival. Bearcats. Pours 1971. Set in the chaotic days of the American West, but with a twist. Bearcats wasn't your typical cowboy show. Instead of gunslingers, it followed two adventurers solving mysteries using gadgets, disguises, and brains over bullets. Think Wild Wild West, but younger, faster, and more experimental. The concept was unique, almost ahead of the curve, but audiences didn't know what to make of it. Was it a Western, a spy show, a detective series? It tried to be everything, and that became its downfall. Despite stylish storytelling and ambitious ideas, Bearcats couldn't lock in a loyal audience. After one season, it disappeared. Today, it stands as a forgotten experiment, a show that tried to reinvent an entire genre and got lost in the process. Viva Valdez, 1976. Viva Valdez was groundbreaking for its time, but centering on a Mexican-American matriarch navigating the complexities of family life, work, and culture. At a time when TV had very few Latinx protagonists, this show was an attempt to bring more diverse voices to the forefront of American television. The show followed Valdez, a strong and vibrant woman juggling her duties as a mother and a professional, breaking cultural and gender norms. Despite its cultural significance, Viva Valdez struggled to attract a large enough audience. The sitcom's premise, while fresh and relevant, didn't translate into widespread success, and it was canceled after just one season. However, Viva Valdez remains an important part of television history for its positive portrayal of Latinx characters at a time when representation was sorely lacking. The show's failure can be attributed to a variety of factors, including its inability to draw mainstream audiences and the network's limited commitment to a show that didn't fit the mold of typical sitcoms at the time. Even though it ended too soon, Viva Valdez remains a trailblazer, offering a rare and valuable glimpse into a family life rarely seen on screen in the 1970s. The Immortal, 1970 to 1971. Imagine discovering you can never die and suddenly becoming the most hunted man alive. The Immortal built its entire premise around that terrifying idea. The story followed a man whose blood held the secret to eternal life, making him a target for powerful people desperate to exploit it. Every episode felt like a chase. Tense, paranoid, and unpredictable. It had all the ingredients for a long-running hit, but somehow it never fully connected. Maybe it was too dark, or maybe too repetitive, or maybe audiences just weren't ready for a hero who couldn't escape his own existence. After one season, it vanished. But looking back, The Immortal feels like a blueprint for modern sci-fi thrillers, proof that sometimes the most powerful ideas arrive before their time. Emergency, 1972 to 1973. Emergency was a medical drama that followed the lives of paramedics and emergency room staff as they navigated high-stakes situations and life-or-death decisions. For its time, the series was groundbreaking in its portrayal of paramedics as essential first responders, offering a new perspective on medical dramas. It balanced medical action with personal drama, delving into the human side of emergency services. While it initially attracted a solid audience, Emergency struggled to evolve and keep pace with the growing competition in the genre. The series focused on the intense, life-threatening moments, but after a season, it became clear that it wasn't capturing the emotional depth that later medical dramas, like MASH, would successfully incorporate. The show's cancellation after just one season left viewers craving more. Though Emergency failed to make a lasting impact, it played a crucial role in paving the way for later, more successful medical dramas. Its focus on paramedics and emergency room staff was groundbreaking, but the lack of depth and an overarching narrative made it hard to sustain long-term viewer interest. It stands today as an early experiment in the medical genre, with many of the elements that would define later shows yet to be fully realized. The show's failure highlights the difficulty of balancing action, medical realism, and emotional connection in a TV series, especially one that tried to break new ground in a genre that was still finding its voice. Planet of the Apes, 1974. A world where humans are hunted, and apes rule with absolute power. Planet of the Apes tried to bring one of the most iconic sci-fi universes to television, and on paper, it should have been unstoppable. Set in a dystopian future, the series followed two astronauts trapped in a society where humans were second-class beings, constantly on the run from intelligent, authoritarian apes. The concept was rich. The themes were powerful: control, oppression, survival. But television couldn't handle its scale. Budget limitations drained the spectacle. But the tension that worked so well in the films felt diluted in episodic form, and audiences who expected cinematic intensity got something smaller, slower, less dangerous. Ratings slipped, interest faded, and after just one season, it vanished. But looking back, Planet of the Apes wasn't a failure. It was a warning, a story too ambitious for the small screen at the time. Today, with modern production power, it feels like something that could dominate streaming. Back then, it was simply too big to survive. The Nanny and the Professor, 1970 to 1971. The Nanny and the Professor was a whimsical sitcom that blended family-friendly humor with a touch of magic. Juliet Mills starred as a quirky, unintelligent nanny who could do everything from scientific experiments to outsmarting the family's patriarch with her unconventional yet brilliant ways. The show's charm lay in its light-hearted tone and Mills's endearing performance. It was a departure from the typical nanny sitcoms of the era, offering a unique twist by infusing it with elements of fantasy. Despite its charm, the show's gentle approach didn't strike a chord with audiences. It struggled to find its footing in a crowded TV landscape, failing to match the popularity of other family sitcoms. While the show had a loyal following, it couldn't maintain the level of engagement necessary to keep it on the air. After just one season, The Nanny and the Professor was canceled. The show had a warm and wholesome vibe, but its lack of consistent storylines and inability to generate sustained viewer interest ultimately led to its downfall. It wasn't a standout hit in a competitive landscape, and its failure to adapt to shifting TV trends left it forgotten after its short run. The Nanny and the Professor remains a charming curiosity from the early 70s, a series that tried to blend magic with sitcom formula, but ultimately didn't capture enough of the audience's heart to last beyond its single season. The Amazing Spider-Man, 1978 to 1979. A live-action adaptation of the beloved Marvel comic character, The Amazing Spider-Man, seemed like the perfect formula for success. Fans were excited to see their favorite web-slinger swinging across the screen in a live-action series. But despite the initial excitement, the show failed to capture the essence of the Spider-Man comics. The special effects were subpar, and the slow pacing didn't do justice to the action-packed nature of the source material. While the series had its moments, it struggled to deliver the thrilling adventure that fans had come to expect from Spider-Man. The web-slinging scenes felt clunky, and the storytelling often lacked the emotional depth and character development that made the comics so beloved. The show's failure can be attributed to several factors, from the lack of high-quality special effects to a narrative that didn't fully capture the essence of Peter Parker's dual life as a superhero and a regular guy. The Amazing Spider-Man couldn't compete with the growing number of superhero shows of the era, and it was canceled after just one season. However, it remains a piece of TV history, a reminder of the growing pains that come with adapting comic book legends to the small screen. Though it didn't succeed, the show laid the groundwork for later, more successful superhero adaptations that would embrace the technology and storytelling needed to bring characters like Spider-Man to life. The Chicago Teddy Bears, 1971. A gangster comedy set during Prohibition sounds like a guaranteed hit, until it isn't. The Chicago Teddy Bears followed a group of small-time mobsters trying to survive in a world dominated by bigger, more dangerous criminals. It had style, humor, and a unique tone that blended crime with comedy. But audiences couldn't quite connect with it. The balance felt off. Too light to be taken seriously, too serious to be fully funny. Despite a strong cast and an intriguing setting, the show never found its identity. Ratings dropped quickly, and it was canceled after just one season. Today, it feels like a concept that could work brilliantly. But back then, it just couldn't find its audience. Kolchak, The Night Stalker, 1974 to 1975. What if the only man telling the truth sounded completely insane? That was the brilliance of Kolchak. The Night Stalker. The series followed Carl Kolchak, a stubborn newspaper reporter chasing stories no one else would touch. Murders, monsters, conspiracies, and things that should not exist. Every case pushed him deeper into a world of vampires, occult killers, and supernatural horrors hiding behind ordinary city life. What made the show so compelling was its tone. It was eerie, tense, and strange, but never predictable. Kolchak was not a polished hero. He was tired, obsessive, and constantly dismissed, which made every discovery feel even more unsettling. But that same formula became difficult to sustain. The monster of the week structure started to feel repetitive, and the network never fully knew how to market something sitting between horror, crime, and satire. So despite its originality, the show disappeared after one season. But unlike many forgotten series, Kolchak, The Night Stalker did not die quietly. Its shadow stretched far beyond its short run, influencing later genre television in a major way. Looking back now, it feels less like a failed show and more like a blueprint, one that arrived too early for the audience that should have embraced it. Search, 1972 to 1973. What if technology could see everything, track anyone, and predict danger before it happens? Search explored that idea decades before it became reality. The show followed a high-tech private investigation team using advanced surveillance tools to solve crimes. For the early 70s, this was groundbreaking. Cameras, tracking devices, remote operations, it felt futuristic. But that was also the problem. It was too complex, too ahead of its time, and sometimes too technical for casual viewers. Despite strong concepts and innovative storytelling, Search couldn't maintain consistent ratings. After one season, it disappeared. But today, it feels shockingly relevant. A forgotten glimpse into a future that eventually came true. The Girl with Something Extra, 1973. This short-lived sitcom, now starring John Davidson and Susan Anton, was a quirky comedy that followed a married couple and the mysterious supernatural powers that Anton's character, a psychic woman, possessed. The premise was fun and light-hearted, but despite the novelty of a female lead with psychic abilities, the show struggled to find its audience. The Girl with Something Extra was caught between its supernatural theme and the typical sitcom structure, never fully committing to either. The humor was tame, And the supernatural elements, which could have been a standout feature, were never explored to their full potential. Though it had some interesting concepts, the series quickly fell into a rut of predictable gags and unconvincing character arcs, resulting in it being canceled after just one season. The Girl with Something Extra remains a rare gem of the 70s. It remembered for its quirky concept and Susan Anton's charm, but it ultimately failed to gain the traction needed to survive in the competitive landscape of network TV. It stands as a reminder of how difficult it was for supernatural comedies to carve out a place in the mainstream at the time. The Monkees, 1966 to 1967. Though technically not a 1970s show, the Monkees found a resurgence of interest during the 70s as part of the musical nostalgia movement. The show, created as an answer to the Beatles films, followed a fictionalized version of the popular rock band. While it gained immense popularity during its initial run, The Monkees was canceled after just 2 seasons. The show's fast-paced, goofy humor and musical performances were ahead of their time, but the lack of a serious storyline and the commercial exploitation of the group created a rift with the audience. The band itself struggled to shake off the image of being a made-for-TV act, despite its musical talent. By the time the show ended, the Monkees had become a cultural phenomenon, but it couldn't sustain its momentum on television. Even though it was short-lived, the show achieved cult status and influenced generations of musicians and TV shows that followed. In the years after its cancellation, the Monkees became a beloved piece of pop culture, remembered for its impact on both television and music. It's a testament to how a show can be both a commercial and cultural success, yet still fall short of sustaining a long television life. Some TV shows come and go without leaving a mark, while others become infamous for their quick rise and fall. These forgotten gems of the 70s remind us of how unpredictable television can be. From bold experiments to shows that didn't quite hit the mark, they're a fascinating part of TV history, forever lingering in the shadows.